It is with a deep sense of pride and pleasure that my wife and I join you here today as we witness Canadians coming together in a renewed sense of national pride, unity, and hope.
And with that, King Charles, the King of Canada, began the speech from the throne.
On a day very heavily laden with ceremony.
Yeah, it seemed to be a lot of hopes and expectations riding on that 24 hours that Charles and Camilla were in Ottawa.
I mean, was Canada's sovereignty at stake in those 24 hours? I don't know, but moments like this in the speech certainly got a big response.
When my dear late mother addressed your predecessors 7 decades ago, she said that in that age and against the backdrop of international affairs, no nation could live unto itself. It is a source of great pride that in the following decades, Canada has continued to set an example to the world in her conduct and values as a force for good. As the anthem reminds us, the true North is indeed strong and free.
I'm Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's The House.
I'm Daniel Thibeault, host of Radio-Canada's political show Les Coulisses du Pouvoir.
And I'm Jason Markusoff, and as the anthem reminds us, I'm from far and wide.
Together, we are House Party, a weekly podcast diving into the big burning questions about this new government. And this week, we're asking, did the King's visit help Canada? Okay, so let's start there, guys. Dan, what do you think? Do you feel better now that King Charles has hung out with us in Ottawa?
Let me sit down with my Quebec friends and see if it makes a huge difference for them. I don't think so. You know what? It's one of those things where I wasn't expecting much from the content because it felt to me like we knew what he was going to say. And everything that we were told on the way to this moment led us to believe that there wouldn't be anything super surprising or very spectacular in there. It's impressive. It's an impressive moment. It is a moment. It's the king that shows up for 24 hours just to read the speech. So the content, not so much. The way it was read, it made for a bit of a special moment. I'm going to say that, and then my Quebec friends are going to call and say, "Oh my God, you're one of them now."
You've been converted. Jason, what do you think?
You know, I think this was going to be a speech where the format and who's presenting is going to matter much more than what is said. Because normally these are discarded right away. They're, it's just the Governor General saying things and then saying what the government's going to do, and then the government starts doing things. Yes, there are those people, those critics, those media types who will say, oh, the throne speech was short on specifics. Well, what do you expect? It's a throne speech. It's not a frickin' encyclopedia. But, sorry.
This house party got a little bit spicy.
A bit spicy. Too much, too
many gin and tonics while you were enjoying the King's speech.
But when it's in the King's mouth instead of the Governor General's mouth, for the first time in most Canadians' lifetimes, it's going to be reused, replayed, referred to not only this year for a while, but in years to come. So this will be, by dint of this being the King's speech, one for the ages.
It's been 48 years, eh? It was in 1977 when his mother was here to read the throne speech, and indeed, I do believe this is going to become something that we'll see quoted throughout the next few years, and it also makes it gives much more visibility to a speech from the throne that's not overly exciting. We probably, and Jason was right on that, we'd probably just turn the page on that pretty much right away. And now it's going to be a story, and likely the lead story all over Canada and in some parts of the world, just because the King read it.
Well, I'm going to throw a little flex in here. Like, obviously, bringing the King to Canada was quite a flex on Mark Carney's part. But
Total flex.
I got interviewed by the BBC's royal correspondent the other day. I mean, the BBC News. Look, Ma, I'm on the BBC, which I think I mention only because it does speak to the fact that there was a significant amount of international media here. They were paying attention. But the question we're asking isn't just, hey, did folks look our way? But did it help us? Is the country actually better off? I think it's hard to say anything other than that it was a nice moment. Now, there are people who are going to say they didn't care about it, and I think that is obviously a totally legitimate.
That's fair.
But it was a nice moment. The world looked at Canada. The King said, hey, you folks, you're strong, you're united. I think the question is to what extent it helps us going forward. But I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I think we should just take a minute to talk about what was in the speech. Dan, you were saying you weren't expecting any big surprises. What part of it stood out for you? What mattered?
It's the Quebecer in me. I like the tone. I like the reaching to Quebec saying, and I can't quote it exactly, but basically, Canada without Quebec is just not Canada, or something like that. Like, it was very specific about making sure that we link them back together, and it felt like, I think he's aware of the fact that he is not overly popular in my province, and I'm pretty sure he knows that the reaction there, and just the fact that the Bloc very publicly said, we're not going to go and listen to the speech of the throne in the Senate because we just don't agree with that kind of symbol. So he knows that, and he still went out of his way to have this little hand reaching out towards Quebec. I thought it was remarkable. The rest of it, if you've read the Liberal program, you've
heard it before.
Yeah, you've heard it before.
It was interesting that the Parti Québécois, we had some conversation with them that we played on the House last week, and Pascal Bérubé, one of the representatives of the party, was saying, it's a joke. The king is a joke. He's a foreign king. It's an anachronism. You think he's going to scare off Donald Trump. I will say, I don't think the premise for this was ever that it was going to scare Donald Trump. But the people who don't like it were probably never going to like it. Jason, for you, was there a moment that stood out?
See, I'm going to go back to the point that Daniel made, talking about how Carney and the King in his speech tried to meet the moment and meet the sensitivities of Quebecers at this point and with this speech. We're in a pretty sensitive moment right now in the West. And I don't know if there was anything particular that addressed that sense of alienation, that Alberta frustration. Yes, there was some talk about conventional energy and projects. And I saw some people talking about how they didn't mention oil and gas directly, specifically, didn't talk about pipelines. I would have been a bit surprised if they'd put in the King's mouth such a climate warrior over time. The King putting things like bitumen pipelines in the King's mouth would have been a bold play. But I thought there was a missed opportunity to address that, to talk about the national, the reach not just from Quebec culture and French culture, but also Western culture, the Western identity, and not Western identity, but like Western alienation in the sense that we want to govern for all Canadians, contributions, economic contributions. There was that missed opportunity. I mean, am I surprised, on the other hand, about, the U.S. stuff? We weren't going to hear King Charles say Canada is not for sale. We weren't going to hear him say,
"Back off, Donald."
Yes,
he wants to break us so he can own us. That's like the political rhetoric, and that's the thing you don't want to have the sovereign say. I was wondering if there was going to be something a bit more tough and pointy than the whole strong and free indeed sort of thing. I was wondering if there was room for it to be a bit more, aimed at the audience of one.
I want to talk, I'd love to talk more about Trump, but I want to talk about your point about Western alienation for a minute, Jason, because it's a really interesting one. It's not something I had thought about, but I do wonder, I want to sort of look at the flip side of it. When I look at the lines in the speech, I've got my copy here that I highlighted that I thought stood out. Renewed sense of national pride, unity, and hope.
I've always had the greatest admiration for Canada's unique identity, which is recognized across the world for bravery and sacrifice in defense of national values and for the diversity and kindness of Canadians.
I mean, the case that is being made in this speech is that it is something special, unique, remarkable to be Canadian. So I take your point that there's not an explicit olive branch to the West, but it is, writ large, a sales pitch for this country and what it means to be a Canadian. And is that not ultimately the response to this question of whether you want to leave the country or not? Well, this is what it means to be Canadian, and here's what Canada has to offer the world, and here's how we are different from the United States and everyone else.
I think for those people who like the idea of Canadian exceptionalism, who think that we are something special, that we are this best country in the world, those lines will resonate. I think that if I could kind of try to underline this whole exercise, it might have been designed to make Canada feel better about its place and its own sense of self, its own sense of sovereignty. So if you are feeling those feelings or inclined to feel those feelings, this may embolden them. But I do think that for a lot of people who are frustrated with Ottawa's treatment of the West, it's a bit of a what's in it for me, bub. So the what's in it for all of us doesn't quite do what's, I think, being pleaded for.
Let's ask the question that everyone wants the answer to. What's in it for Trump? But really, I do want to talk about this because I find this tension between the question of whether or not this was a speech for Donald Trump. It's for an audience of one. Mark Carney keeps insisting, listen, fundamentally, this was a speech for Canadians. I buy that because Canadians are the ones who vote for him, and he does want to keep them on side. I think if Donald Trump gets a message out of this, it's a bonus. One really smart point that someone made about this, though, it's clear that there's a little bit of language baked into the speech that is specifically for the Americans. There's a reference early on to the great important moments of our time. Talk about the Vietnam War, the war on terror. Those are not things that usually find themselves in a speech written by Canadians for Canadians, right? That is a call out to a certain American worldview. So it does seem to me that there was an attempt to, do a little
bit of a reminder to the Americans. Hey, look, this is something that you were heavily involved in. I mean, obviously, was it the main thing, the main goal? Possibly originally when Mark Carney went to London before he triggered the election, it might have been like the first thing he came up with and thought, this would be great and it would make a difference and maybe it would assert Canada's sovereignty. I don't think, we've mentioned that before in previous podcasts, I don't think we're there anymore. I don't think it's the same level. The threat level has gone down on that front. I think some of the language was interesting. I think if the Americans were listening and they say that Donald Trump likes the royalty and he likes the king, and he told Mark Carney that he watched the leaders' debate during the campaign, so maybe he took a few minutes of his time this morning to watch the throne speech. If he did,
come on, he did not watch the debate. Come on,
he said to Carney he did. I'm taking him at his word here.
As we all should.
That's a choice.
I don't know. So did he hear something in there that will make him see Canada differently? I don't know. There was I didn't think it was that bold. I didn't think they didn't try too hard. It was subtle. It's probably the best way to do it in those circumstances. But yeah, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
I mean, obviously it's for Canadians. Obviously it's, a throne speech. Anything that comes from the Prime Minister and from Parliament will be for an attentive Canadian audience. But if there was an international megaphone on this, was it south of the border or was it across the Atlantic? And I would say there was maybe more for the BBC audience and for audiences in France, Germany, Italy, the rest of Europe. He spoke in the section about defense. It will boost Canada's defense industry by joining Rearm Europe to invest in transatlantic security with Canada's European partners. Also talking about the North, but there is a real opportunity to fortify those alliances with the European partners, both in trade, defense, security. As Carney talked about in his interview with our colleague David Cochrane from Power and Politics, big emphasis on the NATO summit coming up after the G7 at the end of June, gearing up for his really big Canada Day bash of announcements or change of a country that's going to happen by then. But I wonder if the king gets more attention in Europe than he does in the U.S.
I can tell you.
And
I was at the airport, and I don't know about you, Catherine, but I didn't see any American network. I saw a lot of British reporters, but no one from the U.S.
Yeah,
so.
Dan and I had a fun little moment. We were both on risers, not right next to each other, but just a few over as the king was arriving yesterday, which was sort of a fun. We should have done house party from there. Frankly.
Oh,
missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Now the main question is, what's next, right? Because, so speech, king, it's all done. We're moving on, going back into the House now. The real business starts there. Will he get the support needed to adopt it? It's still a minority parliament. I think it's fine. Is the real challenge coming now? because he needs to implement those things, and he says he wants to do it fast. So can he do it?
I say yes, but. So I think 100% the real challenge is coming now. I do think there is this sort of sweet spot for Mark Carney right now. He has set himself a wildly ambitious agenda. He communicates very differently than Justin Trudeau. It's not the same kind of flowery language that we're used to. That's the big emphasis on feelings. But in terms of where Mark Carney is setting the bar, we're going to do things, at speeds never seen before, ambitions we haven't seen for generations. He's got a ton he wants to do. Jason talked about the comments about defense spending by Canada Day.
Yeah.
You have to add that to the list of other things he says he's going to do by Canada Day. Tax cut. Dealing with the federal responsibility vis-a-vis inter-provincial trade barriers.
To focus on some infrastructure projects that can have an impact across the country.
It's clear he wants to do something big, make big moves on infrastructure, big moves on defense spending. He hasn't put the Canada Day label, as far as I know, on housing, but that's obviously a burning priority. Yeah. He's feeling pressure to try to do things on crime. So how does all of that fit with his ability to actually get the stuff done? I think right now the opposition parties are... They're going to give him some time. They're not about to bring down the government, but there's also realistically only so much you can do in that time. And he's also got to go to this NATO meeting. He's going to go to host the G7 in Kananaskis. Trump's going to come to that. He's got the first ministers meeting, like all of the potential friction that he might encounter. He has the potential to feel all of it in the course of the next few weeks. And just the House of Commons itself figuring it out,
Now is the time for Mark Carney to start delivering and start falling short of people's expectations. Because basically, what is a throne speech is not a list of expectations or a to-do list or like a table of contents for the year or session to come. He doesn't have much time, as you keep saying. What's he actually going to do? He is actually sounds like he's putting off some of the major acceleration of housing. You can't double the production of housing in a few weeks. And I think let's keep it real about the promise he's making on federal trade barriers by July 1st. He keeps on talking about the federal barriers to internal trade. Well, the reality is a lot of the interprovincial trade barriers are not federal, they're provincial. Mm-hmm. So it's really going to be up to the premiers to do that heavy lifting. I mean, he has this meeting in Saskatoon next week with the First Ministers. The thing that he has going for him in that regard is that all the premiers seem to want to do stuff. There is a real kind of a cross-partisan and cross-jurisdictional will to start doing things and start getting going on things. And so if he's able to harness that and find the ways to smooth through things without, of course, trampling on Indigenous rights or any of the traditional, ways that things can get stymied or caught up or processes that make, rapid action not possible, the ingredients are there for him in a way to do stuff and to deliver in a way I don't know if they have been for any leader for a long time.
Yeah, there's a provincial jurisdiction. Someone from the bloc, I think, mentioned that today. Well, he's going to need to negotiate with the province. There's a lot of stuff that's going to get complicated. And so it's a very ambitious agenda for someone who doesn't seem to realize that there might be a bunch of roadblocks coming up fast. And the other thing is, and I agree with Jason on the, everyone seems to be willing to sit around and there's some goodwill around the table. Mm-hmm. That usually never lasts very long when it comes from the province and the territory. Ask any prime minister who's tried that. It works for about 9 months to a year at the beginning of the mandate. And then there's a reason why they rarely invite them back to sit around the same big table, because that goodwill is gone. And it gets really hard to produce any kind of results from those. And it becomes a gang up from the province and the territories against the feds. And he's not in that phase yet. He's not in that zone. He's got a very, very nice sweet spot to act and get stuff done, but it's not a very long period of time.
I think, when I came to Ottawa, it was the end of the Harper era, the beginning of the Justin Trudeau era. And I remember that first ministers meeting. So the prime minister and all the premiers, I believe it was at the Museum of Nature.
Yes.
And Kathleen Wynne was the premier of Ontario, and she was wrapping her arms around Justin Trudeau. Harper hadn't been willing to have these meetings. And it was literally just this love, and they're hugging each other. And by the end of Justin Trudeau's time as prime minister, and admittedly, that's a lot of time, it was man, this guy won't give us a meeting. You're hearing from PMO that they just don't think the meeting is worth it because they're going to get kicked in the shins. That said, he does have some goodwill right now. The other thing I would add to that, and I think in addition to that goodwill, the Conservatives keep saying, he stole our ideas. I think the fact that there is so much overlap between what Carney wants to do and what the Conservative agenda was helps him too, because writ large politically, these are ideas that Canadians are on side with. So all of that does give him a benefit. Canadians, I think, want him to succeed on the things that he says he's going to do. The other thing I would throw in there, though, is events, dear boy, events. What's the hardest part of running a country? Events, dear boy, events, right? It is the stuff that you cannot predict, from natural disasters to international conflicts, like, goodness gracious, I hesitate to say it, but like pandemic, like, things happen. Ask Justin Trudeau, ask Stephen Harper. These things come at you that you do not see coming. And Carney's point has been that there are a ton of crises already, but unfortunately, more can get added to the pile.
Yeah.
And of course, Trump, in this era, Trump happens, and Trump could happen. Trump could happen at the G7. Trump could happen at the NATO summit. Trump could happen while we're recording this, and maybe we missed something he said on True Social. But so far, speaking of goodwill, we haven't heard any 51st state rhetoric from Trump since the Oval Office meeting. And the Oval Office meeting did seem like the start or an outburst of good vibes coming from Washington towards Ottawa. So maybe there is an opportunity in the coming weeks or coming months for the start of deal making there. This promised economic and security deal that Carney wants to forge.
The Trump thing is interesting because I'm reminded I was covering the G7 in Charlevoix, and everyone thought it went so well and it was good, and then it took off, and right from the plane.
Trump happened.
Yes, Trump happened. And Trump happened hard and took everyone by surprise. And then all of a sudden that meeting that was supposed to had been pretty decent from Canada's point of view just kind of fell apart.
That was when
three tweets.
He tweeted that Trudeau was very weak and dishonest, something like that. Yeah, and sort of revoked his signing of the communique, which has Canada even recovered from the revoked signing of the communique? But this stuff does matter.
All this to say that
it does matter.
And it does happen. There's always a risk. And, and events, we're beginning in the summer, forest fire right now in Manitoba, and it's just the beginning. It could become a huge issue in some other place, some other part of the country. Flash floods, we've seen that in summers too as well. And all of a sudden, the government needs to act and start managing those situations. That takes your attention away from the stuff that you want to do and deliver very, very fast.
I will say there's some classic line in U.S. politics about the nattering nabobs of negativity, and I do wonder if that's what we sound like right now. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And so I do want to emphasize this point.
I want to see that as being realistic.
Perhaps. But I think there is a desire on the part of Canadians, even if they didn't vote for him. A lot of folks want to see him succeed, but it is a high bar he has set. So it's like, we'll see.
One of the measures of success I'm going to be looking for is the diversity of parties which he gets to support him.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau set up his NDP alliance, his confidence supply agreement, and so all he needed was NDP stuff. So all he was able to had to gesture to was fulfill the NDP's wishes. Do we see him getting support of the Bloc on various votes? Do we see him pulling in support from the Conservatives on things like energy and the environment, or on some of his tax cuts or other financial measures? Do we see some NDP support on certain things? Do we see some NDP opposition on certain things? If he's able to build these alliances and find the right alliance for the right moment and express this versatility, it could show the signs of a real potential for him to deliver and to endure in this minority parliament situation.
There's always, I think the key there is to start shopping now, to start discussing now. Yes, you can get the Bloc to help you out on something. It might mean that you will offer protection for supply management in the bill that you're seeking help to pass. The Conservatives, it might be a small window of opportunity with the Conservatives to have a chat and get them to support stuff that's on the economic side. And given the fact that the Conservatives have gone out of their way to react, saying he stole the stuff we had in our platform. So it's kind of hard to vote against the stuff that you're campaigning on. There might be a way there. I'm reminded of someone once who was telling me when Harper was in power in the minority government, he would go around each party leader before tabling a budget to say something like, if there was one thing that you needed in the budget, what would it be? And he would get a little something from each party leader, and he would throw that little something somewhere in the budget. And the day of the budget, there was someone in the Prime Minister's office whose job was to phone the party leader and say, if you go to page 177, you'll find a little thing that you asked for. And that's how you build a way to get support. And so if he's smart, he would, not necessarily the same way, but I would throw lines of communication out there right away and say, how do we work on those? These are my priorities. How do you fit in there? And how can I get you to support them?
Just one more thing before we go. Part of getting stuff done is also being able to make the House of Commons work. The House of Commons chose a speaker this week. Francis Scarpaleggia is a Montreal Island MP. He's the ref. He's the one who's going to try to make sure that everybody gets along and things are stick within bounds. How much, Jason, do you think that matters to Mark Carney's ability to get stuff done?
I think moving past Greg Fergus probably has some. No. I mean,
You're right.
Given that the Conservatives especially had no goodwill towards him, starting anew will matter. I mean, it was very curious that they pulled their own speaker candidates, and I think having a Conservative speaker in this moment of hyperpartisanship would have been a very interesting moment. But a lot of it's going to depend on goodwill from all the sides. The referee is going to be have some sway in it. But a lot of it's going to depend on the participants, not the ref.
I know Scarpaleggia a little bit. He's a mild-mannered man, very
steady as she goes.
Yes, very, very pleasant, interesting guy to have a conversation with. Always measured. I think it feels to me like he's the right guy for the job right now. We'll see how it goes. The main challenge is to try to keep everything to an even tone for the short, middle term. If the government wants to get anything done, that's going to be his mission.
Yeah.
To me, it might matter less on how the speaker performs and how well the Prime Minister performs.
Yeah,
that new figure.
Yeah, indeed. And I did think it was interesting that he expressed a bit of humility. He said, "I'm going to make mistakes. I know you're going to call me out on it."
Mr. Speaker, I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason.
And I think just in terms of like politically, that is the right tone.
Yeah.
That expression around Ottawa, that arrogance is liberal kryptonite. I've heard that a few times. It is not the time to sound arrogant, and he is going to make mistakes because, Dan, you and I have been new on Parliament Hill, and you truly do not know where the bathrooms are.
No.
At first, it takes a while to figure out, and he's going to make mistakes with the
and
spotlight on him.
He sat down for the first time in the House of Commons 2 days ago, a Monday basically, and the learning curve starts there.
But if you can bring the king with you on your first day of school, you could do worse, You could do worse.
Just to your point, Catherine, humility is a super valuable thing to have in a politician. I always find it charming to hear humility. It's one thing to put it in a speech. It's another thing to see whether Carney will actually have humility in the cut and thrust of question period, say.
Indeed.
Uh-huh.
Well, just one more thing to look forward to in this exciting political season. We've already had a visit from the Sovereign. Will we top it in the next few weeks? Remains to be seen. But
we're getting Trump
more
soon,
special guests, please.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of leaders coming
the
in.
King of the United States, indeed. Listen, and we can talk about it all next week on House Party.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right, that is it for House Party this week. Thanks to my co-hosts, Jason Markusoff and Daniel Thibeault, and thanks to the production team, Caitlin Crocker, Jennifer Chevalier, and Carla Hilton. Be sure to give us a follow in the podcast feed for The House so you can catch both House Party and my other show, The House, every week. 2 shows, 1 feed. The House will be with you on Saturday, and House Party will be back next Wednesday with another big, burning political question.